Hi, my name is Bey Logan, and welcome to this special Hong Kong Legends DVD version of Jackie Chan's Police Story. And Police Story's Chinese name is a literal translation of the English, or vice versa. In Cantonese, it's 警察故事. 警察 meaning police, 故事 meaning story. And Jackie was explaining the other day why he had such a basic and simple title for the film. Because prior to that, the titles of the film sometimes indicated what the content was. Particularly in the days of the old kung fu movies, you had like Snake in the Eagle's Shadow and Drunken Master. So you kind of knew from the title what the film was about. And he found as soon as he announced the title of his new film, the unscrupulous low-budget movie producers in Hong Kong would start their own film with a similar title and try to steal his thunder. So when Jackie decided to kind of go up market in terms of making bigger budget event pictures, he purposely chose quite simple names like Project A. When you announce Project A, you're not quite sure what it's going to be. It doesn't even indicate that it was going to be a pirate movie from the title Project A. It's just a generic name. And the same here with Police Story. He decided just to call it 警察故事 Police Story, so that people would know he was making a cop movie of some kind, but nobody would really know what specifically made it different from the other police thrillers made in Hong Kong. I mean, there had been and continue to be police action as made in Hong Kong, but at the time this film came out, there hadn't really been a martial arts police movie or police movies with martial arts and stunt action in them to any great degree. It tended to be more drama and gunplay. And if you look at the films of John Woo and Ringo Lam and Kurt Wong and all the people who have been the past masters of the Hong Kong cop action movie, the martial arts content in those films is kind of negligible. I mean, it's principally gunplay, using guns in the same manner of choreographed action as the martial arts action pictures have been. So Jackie's big innovation here was to say, you know what, I'm going to take all the technology of like physical action that I've been using in my kung fu pictures and my period films and just transplant that into a modern-day police actioner. And that kind of redefined the genre, and it opened the door for, you know, a whole extra style of filmmaking in Hong Kong. And you had like the In the Line of Duty films at D&B, the Tiger Cage movies, and a whole string of like not necessarily imitative, but like films that blended those same elements together of having a modern-day cop storyline with stylized martial arts action sequences. And sometimes I look at Jackie's work and I think that something that John Huston once said, which was that, you know, why in Hollywood do they always keep remaking the good movies? Why don't they remake the bad ones until they get them right? And I think, in a sense, Police Story is a remake of The Protector. Another thing, actually, that I remember reading Roger Ebert quoting, I think it was Cocteau, who had said that the best way to critique a film is to make another film. And in that sense, Police Story definitely would be a critique of The Protector. The Protector had been the second attempt to really launch Jackie on the American market, and had actually been even less successful than his very first American picture, Battle Creek Brawl. The Protector didn't work in the States, and also a re-edited version didn't really work in the Asian market. And so Jackie came back from that experience, and he felt that, okay, if you want me to do a cop movie, a modern-day cop movie, I'll show you what a modern-day cop action film will look like. He actually had first played a police officer character in the ensemble picture, the comedy actioner Winners and Sinners. And The Protector was like the first film where, throughout the movie, Jackie was the main lead and played a cop. But he was very dissatisfied with The Protector. He felt that, you know, he wasn't given a chance to show off his trademark style. So when he came back to Hong Kong, he started developing an idea for his own cop movie. And there's an interesting crossover, because after The Protector had wrapped, the American director, James Glickenhaus, returned to the States, and Jackie insisted that he be allowed to shoot extra footage for the Asian print of The Protector. And if you watch the film, if you see the Asian version, if you watch the final reel, there's extra footage in the fight sequences and also some extra scenes in the movie itself. And you see that there's a slight difference in some shots between Jackie with the length of hair, the hairstyle he had for The Protector, and his, let's say, Police Story haircut. So there's almost like a crossover between the two films because he was evidently in the final stages or even shooting Police Story at the same time as he was re-editing and reshooting and re-editing on The Protector. And a final word on the Protector. A few years ago, I met its director, James Glickenhaus, at the Milan Film Festival, and he's a very nice, charming man, and we had several long conversations. And this was before Jackie had really broken into the international market. And I think Rumble in the Bronx had been released in Asia, but had not been re-edited and re-released in America as yet. And we talked about The Protector, and I mentioned that some of the fans had been disappointed with the films, and James Glickenhaus said, well, that's still the most successful Jackie Chan film internationally and always will be, because the American audience, the mainstream audience, will never sit still for Jackie's style of action. I thought maybe he was right. And of course, then Rumble in the Bronx and Rush Hour and all this other stuff happened. And now I believe Jim Glickenhaus is retired. He's working in his father's stockbroking company in New York. And of course, Jackie's just, as I speak, I mean, he's just had this huge hit with Rush Hour 2. So I guess in that case, the people had spoken and obviously resoundingly appreciate the style of action that Jackie has. So after that little bit of backstory, here we are in the thick of the fray and the drug bust in the shantytown. The shantytown was specially constructed out in the new territories of Hong Kong. There still are a few of these remaining. They're basically corrugated iron structures on these precarious hillsides, which were put together by immigrants or low-paid workers who couldn't afford Hong Kong rent or couldn't find a place to live convenient for where they were working. So they would buy corrugated iron and create literally their own homes. And basically family units would stay together in these expanding families, these expanding villages. The government in recent years has taken some steps to demolish the few remaining shanty towns. There used to be a very sizable one just down the hill from the Golden Harvest Studios. So I wonder if Jackie, in driving to work every day, used to go past and look at that and think, wow, wouldn't it be great to drive a car down through the shanty town? And obviously wouldn't be a smart idea to do that in an actual thriving shanty town. So this one was constructed specifically for the purpose of the sequence that we see at the end of this, which is going to be the car tobogganing sequence. Jackie, previous to this, had been known for his physical action in terms of martial arts and had just begun to move into doing his own stunts and to be known for doing specific, extravagant stunts in his films. But he'd never been known to do vehicular action. And this was the first film where he really started applying that same imagination that he'd applied to martial arts to car stunts. And he wanted to find something that would really impress people to show that he had moved into a new arena. And this sequence was pretty much it. I remember being privy to a conversation between him and the Rush Hour director, Brett Ratner, because Brett had been knocked out by Police Story. And he suggested that they remake the film in the States, and I think the shantytown scene was going to be in Mexico or somewhere like that, and they were basically going to take the film beat for beat and remake it in English in the US, with Jackie, of course, and with Brett directing. And I think one of those projects that fell by the wayside. But it would have been interesting to see. I've always felt about the film as a whole that it's got amazing action sequences, but the structure probably needed to be worked on in the middle part of the movie. The screenplay is credited to Edward Tang, who is Jackie's long-term pet scriptwriter. But I think it has to be said that Edward doesn't really work in the manner of Hollywood scriptwriters in terms of being commissioned to write a script and or pitching a script to producers or coming in with a finished script that's discussed and planned and storyboarded prior to production. His main working method is to kind of coalesce all of the different ideas that Jackie has on a day-to-day basis into some kind of cohesive story structure. And as is evident from the way he moves physically, Jackie's mind leaps from idea to idea and concept to concept at the speed of light. So it's quite a challenge, I think, for Edward and the other scriptwriters Jackie works with to try to maintain the cohesiveness of the whole project and also incorporate the action and comedy that Jackie demands. But obviously they succeed, and the team works, and this film was a huge hit for Jackie, and he's often cited it in interviews as his favourite of his own movies, of the movies he's directed himself. So now leading into this sequence where we see these incredibly brave stuntmen tobogganing their cars down through the shanty town, and there were any number of stuntmen were injured during the shooting of this scene. Something I should mention about that is that we just had somebody was injured on the set of the movie Highbinders, which as we speak I'm in the process of working on, and something happened that shocked some of the other crew, which is that as soon as a stuntman is injured, once that person's been tended to and taken off the set, the shoot continues. And they do not stop, or they don't break. They just carry on. And I think some people maybe look at that and go, wow, they're really callous. They don't really care about this person. But I think the truth of it is that, I mean, Jackie has the same rule about himself. If he gets injured, they do whatever's the bare minimum necessary for him to be taken care of, and then the film will continue. And if he's not there, shoot something else. And it's not that they don't care about the injured person. They have respect for the fact that this person has got injured towards the completion of this project in their efforts to make this film successful and to get the film done. And so to delay production or to somehow impede the production because of their injury is to kind of literally add insult to injury. And I love the score here. That driving beat is really distinctive. And the theme song, this was the first of Jackie's theme songs that really made an impression on the audiences in Hong Kong. I mean, he's had been singing for some time, but this song is probably his most famous, and it still is used by the Hong Kong police as like a recruitment on their recruitment ads and recruitment drive. And after this film, Jackie became the poster boy for the Hong Kong police, and has been used many times for like promotional events, and that's paid off also in that he has access now to police equipment and vehicles for his films. And so Jackie establishing here that he's going to be using any manner of automotive equipment in this movie to show that we are in the present era. This is actually Kwun Tong, which is one of the New Territories townships, not far from Fort Anne, which is where Jackie has his Chan cave now, where he stores all his equipment from the movies, including this umbrella, I think, which is actually a metal umbrella. The umbrella's metal because they found that the wood one kept slipping off, and the bus is actually moving at speed. On certain shots, Jackie did have a cable as well, but a lot of the time it's just him hanging on to this umbrella for dear life. And it's still a very risky stunt, because I think when you're attached to any fast-moving vehicle, one slip and it can be. Now this is just as it looks. I mean, he's basically off the side of the bus and catching on the side and hanging on for dear life. We actually recreated this for a documentary they called Jackie Chan My Stunts, and he was, we'd said, listen, just lean out and tell us what happened. But Jackie being Jackie, of course, he had to jump off the side of the bus. It was a tourist bus, it wasn't a double-decker, and hang on to the umbrella. This is fantastic stuff. I mean, and it really adds a new level to Jackie's character to see him performing these kind of physical feats in a contemporary environment. Interesting to see also how many times scenes from Police Story have been lifted off have been borrowed, let's say, by Hollywood filmmakers in the succeeding years. I myself, I don't think anything wrong with this whatsoever. I mean, a lot of the fans get up in arms about the fact that Sylvester Stallone borrowed a particular stunt involving this bus for his movie Tango and Cash. And you stole this idea from Jackie, and people complain about, Reservoir Dogs based on City on Fire by Ringo Lam. But I mean, if you look at Hong Kong movies, how they've wholesale borrowed is like a nice way of putting it, have borrowed stunt sequences and storylines and characters and designs from Hollywood films, and nobody raises an eyebrow. And then when the reverse is true, they get up in arms that Hollywood is borrowing from Hong Kong. And of course, for a long time, action directors in Hollywood were completely safe because, outside of the cult following, no one had really seen Police Story. So there's a lot of sequences from the film that were just lifted out and put into other movies. We actually went back to that location when we shot Jackie Chan My Stunts and did It's completely different now. It's a built up, like most of Hong Kong, it's become built up in the succeeding years. And there's now, up at the top of the hill down which he was running, where it looks fairly empty in that shot, is actually quite a thriving suburban community. Nice editing for this sequence here, because a lot of, as Jackie himself says, it doesn't matter how well you understand action, movie action, unless you understand editing, then you cannot make an action movie. I mean, maybe you can be a stuntman or an actor, but you can't be a filmmaker. And leading up to this shot, now these guys really got hurt because the brakes actually went at the wrong time. And they were meant to land on the specially sprung car that's behind Jackie, but instead they went. And notice he keeps walking. He didn't break the shot until coming up, goes outside and cut. And at that point, people would have run in and they put those poor guys onto the stretchers and carry them off to hospital. Thankfully, they were not permanently or seriously injured, but it was a heavy impact with the road. And Jackie says he just heard them land, carried on to get the shot, and then after cut, they were taken away. And again, it might seem callous, but if you think about it, if he had stopped and got out of character and immediately turned around to see if these guys are okay, at some point, if you're going to respect their efforts and you're going to do that scene in the movie, and for whatever reason, technically the shot couldn't be used, you're going to put 2 more stunt guys through the windows, and that means you're doubling the risk. 2 guys have already got hurt. So he carried on, kept the shot, and thankfully the stuntmen lived to fight another day. And that, of course, that stunt you can see at the beginning of Tango and Cash, when Sylvester Stallone fires his gun in the air, and I think Robert Zadar, the big-jawed bad guy actor, is one of the guys flying through the windshield. We're at the police station here, which is an actual police station that's been redressed for the movie. It's actually not on the back lot. And introducing on the right there, Tung Biu, or Uncle Bill, of Bill Suk, who's a veteran of the Hong Kong film industry, and is one of the most is a regular player in the Police Story series and its spin-offs and sequels. By night, he's a race commentator. He's a racing pundit. You see him on these long. I mean, there's hours and hours of race commentary. I mean, horse racing is the only form of legalized gambling in Hong Kong, and I think, as most people know, Chinese people, they really love to gamble. So the horse racing is an incredible hot topic, and so Tung Biu has made a living for himself as a pundit in the newspapers and on TV, and also as an actor. And he's a fine character actor and somebody that Jackie's worked with. You can see him in Miracles and many other of Jackie's movies. And you see him in all the Police Story films and films like First Strike and Project S, which are like spin-offs and part of the Police Story series. And Jackie was quite brave in this film in that he did not paint the police force itself as being golden, knights in armor riding out. I mean, this gentleman, the superintendent in the movie, is depicted as being a real by-the-book stickler for detail, and somebody who's sitting in an air-conditioned office and giving out orders while his men are out in the front line risking their lives. And I think this conflict does exist probably within the police force in most countries between the bureaucracy and the foot soldiers, which is the beat cops. So they actually played on that, and Jackie incorporated that into the script. And this is a case, I guess, of art imitating life, or vice versa, because here you have Jackie being put forward by the police in the movie as like the perfect ideal cop, as a poster boy for what a good Hong Kong cop should be like. And then, because of the film's success, apparently there was an increase in the recruitment of people wanting to be Hong Kong police officers. So the police were delighted to work with Jackie, and he really became and did photo shoots exactly like the one that we're seeing here, where he came out and said, join the Hong Kong police, support your local police. And it really started redefining Jackie, who up until then had been this kind of clownish, bumbling screen hero, into a more serious figure, somebody active in social issues and somebody who came to represent Hong Kong. So they busting an opium smoker, which is probably one of the main, what at that time was one of the things that Hong Kong police officers had to do. Quick plug for the Marine Police. And this was the poster shot for a number of the movies, the shot of Jackie on the motorbike and with the helmet. And looking back on the film, I think that Jackie's aim with this film was to make a movie that would really communicate with an audience he hadn't reached before, because it's very much a film driven by its plot as well as by just a series of action sequences strung together with spectacular stunts and fights. He's actually taken some effort to flesh out the relationships between the major characters and to have a plot-driven film. And it's not that Hong Kong movies had not had that before. It's just that generally, when you'd had action movies, if you go back to the 80s, the golden era of Hong Kong action movies, I mean, the plot of most of those kung fu pictures could be written down on the back of a matchbook with a space to spare. But here he actually does take some effort to plot the film out. And we should mention there's actually several versions of the film. There's another version that was released in various Asian territories where the very opening of the movie has Jackie as one of Jackie's colleagues arriving at the station and getting like a sneak attack. It's his birthday and he gets hit with a cake. And that's paid off later in the film when Jackie gets the same treatment from him. And that opening sequence was kind of soft and evidently did not play for many markets outside of Asia. Here we have one of our two leading ladies, Lam Ching-ha, who's like in this film is the girlfriend of the main villain and somebody who becomes an unwilling witness against him, against the main bad guy played by Chu Yan. Chu Yan, the main villain, was a prolific Shaw Brothers director and then became a character actor and is still alive and well and working on TV in Hong Kong. But the ageless Lam Ching-ha, or Brigitte Lin, was one of the great icons of Taiwanese cinema, Taiwanese romantic movies, and had appeared in dozens of films by the time Police Story was made, and then became more selective through the 80s and 90s and really turned in some wonderful performances. Probably, apart from Police Story, she's known for being one of the stars of Zoo Warriors from the Magic Mountain, and her last great performance was in Dragon Gate Inn. And she really went out in style, because I always remember Dragon Gate Inn. There's this fantastic top shot of her before she's sucked down into the sand, where she just looks up into the camera and she's just so beautiful and so radiant. And then after that, she retired. So she retired and she married the head of the Asian Esprit company, and they've had 2 children. And I know Choi Hark wanted to get her back in front of the camera to shoot a cameo for his sequel to Zoo Warriors. And he even said, look, no, you don't have to come on the set, you don't have to actually work on the film. We can shoot something in a studio against a green screen and we'll like CG you, we'll use special effects to put you in the film. And she wasn't interested. Part of the reason that actresses, when they retire, stay retired, is that their husbands do not like them working. I mean, the implication would be that this woman had to work because the husband could not support her, and that if an actress is retired and married a rich guy, he should be taking care of her. So she was retired, and she stayed retired. At the time Police Story was made, Brigitte Lin was one of Jackie's best friends, as was her then boyfriend, an actor called Charlie Chin, who you may remember from the My Lucky Stars series. He plays like the handsome, suave, dapper ladies' man, and he also had a nice role. He kind of they played on that, his screen persona, for the film Eastern Condors, where he plays like the girl chasing member of the Eastern Condors unit. But he was in his day was also a Taiwanese actor, and had been a major matinee idol in Taiwan. And that's when he'd met Lam Ching-ha, Brigitte Lin, and they began their relationship, and they became good friends with Jackie. And she really hadn't, at the time the film was made, and she had not done a contemporary action picture. So Jackie said, "Look, I'm looking for somebody to be this character, to be to move the plot, and to be a central figure in Police Story. Would you like to do it?" And she came on board. And I think a lot of the overseas market of Jackie Chan fans, if they know Brigitte Lin, it's from this film, because she made really quite an impact with the role. She's an ageless beauty, because, I mean, I saw her actually not so long ago in the Peninsula Hotel, and she looked just as lovely as she does here. So whatever product she's taking, maybe she should market that. But then I guess she doesn't want to do any business, because her husband was not up for that. Here's the exterior. We're actually in the central area of Hong Kong, and Jackie was lucky that he got access to these facilities, because often in the days of doing action films in the 80s, it was very hard to get permission to shoot on location anywhere in Hong Kong, and a lot of the time you had to shoot illegally or shoot on the streets and stay one step ahead of the police. And a friend of mine, I remember, told me once he was shooting a car crash scene in Central for a movie, and he was a Westerner, and he'd just been working in Hong Kong for a short amount of time. And the scene was that two cars crash, and they get out. He and another guy would get out of one of the cars and run off. And they did the first take, and he gets out the car and runs off. And he noticed as he was running that there was one of the other grips was running, one of the other crew was running along next to him and really acting, and really looked like he was terrified. And he thought, wow, this guy's really, a good actor. And they looked over his shoulder, he saw these people apparently dressed in policemen's outfits running along, blowing their whistles, and he was like, wow, those extras really look like policemen. They looked over his right shoulder, and there was the cameraman carrying the camera and running. And that's when he realized, of course, that they were not extras, they were real policemen, and they really were running from what was basically an illegal car crash that had been staged in Central for this film. But that wasn't for Police Story, and Jackie, because of his position in the industry, and also I think because of the content of the film, got unprecedented support from the local police in terms of where he could and could not shoot in Hong Kong. And the film's really benefits from that, because it gives, even though the action is extravagant, and even though the martial arts sequences, the fight sequences, are by no means realistic, there is a certain feel of verisimilitude to scenes like this, where we're evidently in something that very closely resembles a police interview room. And in some of the other cop movies that have been made previously, and even the old black and white movies, everything had been shot on a stage, and you could tell, because they really hadn't mastered the art of disguising sound stages so that they would look like the real article. The sequence we're about to see coming up is one of the comic highlights of Jackie's career, where he's trying to scare this witness into cooperating. So he secures the services of one of his fellow officers to play a mad killer to invade her apartment, and then he defends her, and supposedly she'll be so grateful to him for defending her that she will then cooperate with the police. And there was some talk about a movie, I think it was going to be Jackie with Roberto Benigni, but they were going to do a kind of an action picture together, or a comedy action picture together, and had the idea to recreate this sequence. I think Benigni was going to play the part that's played by Mars, Sheng, who plays the cop, the other guy who's been hired to, or not hired, but who's been approached to come in and pretend to be a killer. I don't know if they're still going to do that movie, but that'd be another example. That would be an example of Jackie recreating his own work from Police Story, rather than the normal instance, which is that he was his work was being borrowed by Hollywood filmmakers. And there's Mars in his fright mask. Let's talk about Mars for a minute. Mars' Chinese name is Sheng, which means Mars, like the planet Mars. And he is an old friend of Jackie's and a colleague from when they were both stuntmen together, and you can see them on the set of the movie Unicorn Fist with Unicorn Chan, these two stunt guys, and the bonds between them are very, very close. Mars was not actually a student at the same Peking Opera School that Jackie went to. He wasn't a student of Yu Jim Yun, who was Jackie's master, but he also learnt the opera, and I think he trained under Fan Fok Fa, who was the female master of opera in Hong Kong at that time, and trained a number of people, including John Lone. And Mars certainly had trained in opera and martial arts and stunt work, and he doesn't really have the looks to be a leading man, but his energy and his commitment earned him Jackie's respect, and they've been working together ever since. The reason that Mars is so named, according to what Jackie told me, is that when he was a kid, he had some injury he sustained some kind of injury to his head and had to go to the hospital, and the doctors had to operate on his skull. And in doing so, they opened his skull and they had to actually put some metal inside, or maybe they left a bit of the equipment inside or something, so that from when he recovered from that, his behavior changed. And so because he seemed to be almost like an alien, he got the nickname Mars, and he's been known by that name ever since. And fans of Jackie's movies will have seen him in almost every film from Dragon Lord onwards, and he had a co-starring role in Dragon Lord. Previously, he'd actually been a leading man in a movie called Lackie and the Lady Tiger, which was at Seasonal Films, which was the company that Jackie had worked with when he'd made Drunken Master and Snake in the Eagle Shadow. And the producer, Yun, was looking for other stuntmen, martial arts actors to do comedy martial arts movies with. So he gave Mars a chance, and they did Lackie and the Lady Tiger, which is not a bad martial arts picture, but it suffers from the fact that really Mars is does not really have the look of a leading player. As a supporting man, he's great. As a stunt man, he was working until recently at TVB, working out all the wire rigging and stuff for them. And that's one thing about Jackie's filmmaking family, is that once they've been established in the business and learned their craft, they can then earn a living anywhere else. It's almost like it has been in the past, like an informal stunt school. And I believe now Jackie has plans to formalize that, so that there will actually be an official Jackie Chan action movie stunt school, so that people who want to learn his specific style of filmmaking, everything from shooting scenes like this to stunts to editing and all the other attributes of Hong Kong filmmaking, they can go to the Jackie Chan school to learn, and that's being planned at the moment. But the timing here is great, and Brigitte had not really done this style of action before, and in fact nobody had, because this movie really is groundbreaking in terms of changing the way in which action scenes were shot. It's trying to strike a balance between realism and the kind of extravagant fighting scene in the kung fu movies. The reason I think that there was previously had not been much in the way of martial arts fighting in cop movies was that, as is not the case in, say, the UK and some other countries around the world, the Hong Kong police are armed. So it was harder, I think, realistically, to find situations in which policemen would be using specifically martial arts techniques to deal with criminals, because they have guns. So this was the fact why people like John Woo and the other cop and gangster movie filmmakers focus more on gunplay than they did on fight action sequences. And Jackie in this film broke new ground because he put the two together side by side, and pretty much it works. I mean, he's using a gun until such time, or in whichever circumstances a cop would use a gun, whereas they also allow time for those instances when he doesn't have a gun, or it's not suitable for him to be firing bullets at people, where he does use this kind of hyped up kickboxing that his style had evolved into. And I was listening to him the other day. He was doing an interview for the BBC and describing his progression as an action filmmaker and the reason why he always had to stay one step ahead of the competition. And he said, when he did comedy, kung fu and drunken boxing movies, everybody followed him. Then he did like the kickboxing, hyped up kickboxing, action, modern style cop films. Everybody followed him. Then he started doing incredibly dangerous stunts, and nobody followed him. So at that point, he realized that he had to come up with more and more extravagant and dangerous stunt sequences in order to maintain his position as the king of Asian action cinema. And certainly Police Story delivers. I mean, we have the toboggan, the car tobogganing at the beginning of the movie, and then, of course, by the very end, we have the sequence in the shopping mall, which still stands out as one of the most consistent and high-impact action sequences Jackie had ever shot. Here, I think a blatant opportunity to keep Lam Ching-ha in her lingerie for as long as possible, and I'm sure none of the male, and maybe none of the male, and even some of the female viewers are quite happy to see Brigitte, thus attired. And we're leading up now to the first martial arts fight sequence in the film, so let's talk a little bit about how Jackie's on-screen fighting style had evolved. Back in the days of the Kung Fu pictures, it really devolved down to two guys duking it out in a wide shot, and these long protracted takes with the rapid-fire exchange of techniques back and forward so that it became almost dance-like, the choreography of the sequence. And Jackie was somebody who really looked at new ways in which you could show action on film. And besides just having a long take with two guys fighting, that you could use fast editing and playing with camera speed to add impact to the fight sequences. So really kind of applying the technology of filmmaking to the already very highly accomplished technology of Hong Kong fight sequence choreography. And in this film, he broke new ground by having several people running in and out of frame for him to fight at the same time, rather than the old-fashioned style, which was one guy at the front of the frame duking it out with the lead, while there were like 8 guys running back and forward trying to seem busy. So here we have the setup, the old baby in the pram, fake baby in the pram stunt, and here comes the stunt team. And actually, if you look carefully during this sequence, you can see a van parked in the background with the JC Stunt Team logo. So I guess that's a kind of product placement. And at the time the film came out, the Hong Kong audiences embraced it wholeheartedly. I did hear criticism from some fans in the West that they felt the action was too fast, and you can completely understand why. I mean, if you consider that the films that they had seen of Jackie were like Battle Creek Brawl and The Protector, which are very solid in terms of the action choreography, you can see why they would think this movie is almost too fast. You saw that high kick there and a moment ago, which is an example of Jackie using editing to kind of just cut in on the point of impact and use the power powder to add impact. And after that, I mean, the action, of course, moving too fast for me to do a racing commentary, but there was one of the stuntmen flipping in the air before hitting the ground. Again, something that you hadn't seen in a contemporary Hong Kong action film. All kinds of movements were used in the period movies. But Jackie was really breaking new ground, not just in terms of what he was doing, but in terms of a stunt team as a cohesive unit working together to and using their timing and energy to create a different kind of on-screen action. And this is the first time, really, that the Jackie Chan stunt team got to show its stuff. And they, apart from, of course, the martial arts fight sequences, there's also any number of stunt scenes in the film. And Jackie really formed the group specifically for this film. The Singar band was formed specifically towards doing Police Story, and is still in existence in various ways, shapes and forms up until the present day. And I think probably it's one of the great badges of honour of anybody who's worked in martial arts action pictures to have been a member of the Jackie Chan stunt team. There actually are 2 non-Chinese, or rather I should say European members now, Brad Allen and Paul Androvsky, which is, I think, a sign of what Jackie's planning over the next couple of years, which is to try to communicate to the international audience, or rather to would-be filmmakers, would-be action filmmakers internationally, what the Jackie Chan style is, so that he can communicate to the next generation all the information that he's learned over his past 20 years of filmmaking, 20 years plus of filmmaking. Jackie himself, of course, a huge car nut, and when you consider how much he loves cars and loves driving, it was kind of it took him a while, I guess, to find a movie that would really allow him to show that off. And Police Story was it, because he's driving various vehicles, or various vehicles are featured throughout the film. Jackie himself represents Mitsubishi, the car giant Mitsubishi. So wherever he shoots around the world, he gets cars sent over, not just to be in the film, but for his own personal use. As I'm speaking, I'm in Dublin for the movie Highbinders, and Mitsubishi kindly sent over a number of Jeeps for the use of Jackie and his stunt team and personnel. So that relationship has continued on from the period of Police Story up until the present day. Talking about action sequences, a lot of the interviewers have asked Jackie about, do they speed up the film? And of course, this is a misnomer, because if you speed up the film, you actually slow down the action. And if you slow down the rate at which you shoot the film, then when you play it back, the action on screen seems quicker. And this is what Jackie had done, and he had played back. He was playing around with film speed and editing for this film, and some of the stuff that now might seem fast and jerky, or that did seem fast and jerky at that time, now it's totally the accepted style of Hong Kong action films. Here's the other leading lady, Maggie Cheung, Jiao Man-yok, and one of the roles that really put her on the map. She and Jackie worked together many times. She was in the other films of the Police Story series, but I feel she was increasingly sidelined, particularly in Police Story 3. She didn't come off very well opposite Michelle Yeoh, who was playing a much more proactive role. But she had been an entrant she was educated, Maggie Cheung was educated in the UK. At one time she was working in a supermarket on Gerrard Street in London's Chinatown, and she was she came to back to Hong Kong to enter the Miss Hong Kong pageant, and she didn't win, but she attracted enough attention that she got to offers to make films, and she was in any number of these chase the girl comedies. There's Paul Wei, who was a key member of the Jackie Chan stunt team at that time, and in the original opening of the movie, he's the guy that gets the pie in the face from Jackie and the guy. So this was kind of paying back that gag, but of course we don't get that gag now. Going back to Maggie, this was actually one of the films she did before she had her teeth fixed. If you notice, her teeth are slightly different here. And she used to have a kind of a slightly more goofy screen persona. And she actually had dental work done prior to the movie Center Stage, which Jackie Chan produced and Stanley Kwan directed. And it was about the tragic story of an actress called Ruan Ling Yu. And it was an award-winning film. It didn't make any money, but it was an award-winning film. And they're one of the many times in his career that Jackie has showed the audience his butt. Speculate as you will, but that's happened in any number of films. We took great measures to avoid doing that in High Binders. Nice Leroy Neiman print on the wall behind Brigitte. Then I guess the designer actually put that there. Unlike most Hong Kong action films, a lot of the stuff was actually shot on location, so set dressers would come in and redress an existing apartment, as they've done in this case. So maybe Jackie had collected these Leroy Neiman boxing posters and decided to incorporate them in the shot. But Maggie Cheung went from doing window dressing, wallflower roles in Hong Kong movies, and from supporting Jackie in films like this one and Project A Part 2 and any number of other films, to becoming, I think, the most acclaimed Hong Kong actress of her generation. And most recently, you may have seen her in the film In the Mood for Love, directed by Wong Kar-wai. And she did actually break into the action scene with Heroic Trio, in which she co-starred with Michelle Yeoh and Anita Mui. But for a long time, because she's not an action practitioner, she was restricted to girlfriend roles, as she is here. And though she actually does some stunts herself in this film, and in Police Story 2 was very seriously injured when a stunt went wrong. She's not an on-screen fighter as such at this stage, and it was later that she showed her stuff in Heroic Trio and really established that she could swing a fist of fury with the rest of them. A quick note about the Cantonese version of the film. At the time Police Story was made, films were principally shot without sound in Hong Kong. The reasons for this were many. It was a very noisy and difficult place to shoot sound, and also many of the actors in the film would be speaking different dialects, Cantonese, Mandarin, and other dialects. There was also the fact that they often were working from incomplete or non-existent scripts, meaning that sometimes you really didn't want to record too much. You just wanted to dub in the sound later, and that's what they did. They used to dub the whole film after the movie was finished. And only rarely would the actor actually dub his or her own dialogue. More often than not, they had voiceover artists who would work from film to film. And in this case, the voice here is not Jackie, but in fact is his regular voice double. And the audience did not get to hear Jackie's real voice until Police Story 3, which was the first movie that Jackie did where he shot sync sound, which is actually recording sound live on the set. This is such a great... The fans always love this sequence. And it's really... It's actually quite cruel because poor Maggie gets abused in this scene, and indeed in the other Police Story films. It really seems to be the worst fate in the world to be Jackie's on-screen girlfriend, because if you survive the film, then you get subject to this kind of abuse. And she was pretty game. I mean, that's one thing about Maggie. Even though she did not have any action training as such, she was gung-ho, and she really tried to keep up with whatever she was asked to do in the films. And talking about Jackie's influence, I noticed that he's wearing this kind of green one-piece jumpsuit in the film, which was something, exactly the same outfit was worn by one of the bad guys at the opening of The Protector. So maybe that's where he was influenced in that particular costume choice. And talking about Jackie being influenced by films that he did that did not work, I think there's actually, you could make a case, there's kind of a through line for that, which is, for example, Project A, which was a pirate film. Prior to that, Robert Clouse, the director of Battle Creek Brawl, had developed a film for Jackie as like a follow-up, which was called Blood Island, which was going to be set in the 1930s. And it was going to be or rather at the turn of the century, and it was going to be a pirate movie set in the South China Sea. And I'm not suggesting for an instant that Jackie actually stole the idea from Robert Clouse, but I do think that they had discussions about the movie, and it may have set the train of thought running in his mind that he could do something with a pirate film, and that became Project A. And they never got to do Blood Island because Battle Creek Brawl had done okay, but it didn't make enough money that you necessarily wanted to immediately re-team Robert Clouse and Jackie Chan. So that's an example really not so much of Jackie remaking a bad movie as taking a concept that he'd been working on and taking it in a whole new direction in the Asian market. And he's, I think, constantly done this. I mean, you could almost look at something like Miracles as being semi-influenced by Battle Creek Brawl, because even though the storylines are totally dissimilar, like I think Jackie probably would look at something like Battle Creek Brawl and say, here's a film where we've incorporated my style of action into the 1930s setting with all these sharp suits and hats and everything. And the fact that the idea of doing an action martial arts action picture in that milieu paid off with Miracles, which is obviously set during the same era, and also makes use of the same kind of costumes and the hats and all the cool stuff they used to have in the 30s. I mean, I thought the 30s probably was the coolest time to be a man. You know, definitely the outfits were a lot slicker than anything that we wear today. And Jackie in his apartment late, and there's Paul Way again on the phone. Paul's like a top stunt guy for Jackie and sustained many injuries over the years. Very good with, not really a martial arts fighter as such, but very good with vehicular stunts, and still working in the industry to this day. I mean, he and Jackie came to a parting of the ways some years ago. But at the time that this film was made, you can see him in Young Master. He plays has a brief scene where he plays the master of like a rival school. And here we are in court, and you'll notice that the lawyers are all decked out in the Queen's robes. At the time this film was made, Hong Kong was still a British colony and was administered under British law. And so they still wore the wigs, and it was very much... And actually, contrary to what we see in this scene, court cases were conducted in English, that the judges were primarily expatriates, and they employed translators to interpret the testimony of Cantonese-speaking witnesses. And of course, as time passed and the handover happened in 1997, the moves were made that cases could be conducted entirely in Cantonese, and that's happening more and more at the moment. But for the purposes of this film, I think it was probably felt it was cumbersome. Here's Michael Lai, composer of the music for many of Jackie's films, including this one, in his little cameo as this guy trying to get into a parking space before Jackie does. Michael's a great character, acted in dozens of films and composed the score for dozens of films, and still right now he and Jackie work together. There's a club called Pink Mau Mau in Hong Kong where Jackie's one of the owners and Michael is like the music director, and Michael organised they've got a kind of rockin' house band in there, and Jackie sometimes comes up and sings or plays the bongos and takes part. You know, he loves music. He's a very musical person. So that was Michael's quick claim to fame. So here we are in court, as I say. I mean, for the purposes of the film, it was probably felt that it would be very difficult to have everybody saying stuff once in Cantonese and then saying it again in English. And you look at this sequence. I mean, yes, it's not exactly L.A. Law or you know, any of the great crime shows or crime movies set with courtroom drama that have been made in the States. But for a Hong Kong martial arts action film, even a dramatic scene to this level was really quite a step forward. Close up there, the villain, Chu Yuan, who, as I mentioned earlier, was a prolific martial arts action movie director when he was at Shaw Brothers, and had also worked at Golden Harvest. But he's somebody who, interestingly, gave up directing entirely and decided to focus all his energies on becoming an actor, and indeed is one of the most prolific character players that there is in Hong Kong right now. You'll notice one thing that is realistic about the courtroom setting. There is a smattering of Western faces among the onlookers, and there certainly would have been in a court at this time. Court reporters would have been European. They would obviously not have been hearing cases heard in Cantonese, but they're there, and people always ask me, who are these guys? And normally they're just travellers or backpackers or people who happen to be living in Hong Kong, and they have these first the assistant directors whose job it is to go out into the community and find Western people living in Hong Kong who want to be in movies. And it's normally a question of going into the notorious Chungking mansions, setting for Wong Kar-wai's Chungking Express, and basically holding up a couple of $100 bills and saying, who wants to be in a movie? And then those guys get to come down and sit there around all day, more often than not at all understanding what's being said or what's going on, and then they go home and then that's it. But I get their 15 minutes of fame, and Jackie, I think, is somebody who has slowly come to more and more accept the fact that there needs to be a crossover between East and West. And in the time this film was made, and from several of his earlier films, Western faces were a relative rarity and really were kept in the backstory. And then as time progressed, there was more and more sense that he was making international films, and you had a cross-section of players, people from Hong Kong and from Japan and Korea and from Europe and then from the United States. So he was moving more towards making world cinema action films, whereas at the time of Police Story, I think we can say he was really making films for the then thriving Hong Kong market, because at the time, Police Story would easily have recouped its production budget in Hong Kong alone, based on its theatrical revenues and pre-sales for home video and TV and whatever other markets existed, and it would then make a huge profit throughout Asia. So it was almost like an accident, should we say, that the film did pick up steam and did perform so well on the international market as like an independent feature. It actually got a very limited theatrical release, and I believe it was the very first of Jackie's Hong Kong movies. I mean, not counting Cannibal Run and Battle Creek Brawl and The Protector, but it was the first of Jackie's Hong Kong films to get any kind of theatrical release in the UK, and it was very low-key, but a major step forward because, of course, unlike most of the other martial arts action actors from Hong Kong, he has become a bona fide theatrical star and is not a straight-to-video actor. And I think if you did a head count, around the world, he is, pound for pound, the most popular actor of any stripe. If you include the huge markets he has in China and Africa and South America, and those generally underestimated territories, if you actually went around and did a head count of how many people like Jackie Chan as opposed to any other actor, he would come out way ahead of any other living performer. So that's something that that kind of pulling power is something that can't be underestimated. And that, of course, I think is probably how you explain 120, 130, whatever the final tally is on Rush Hour 2. It's like just domestically, it's like 130 as we speak. And obviously it will do huge business worldwide for that reason. And the courtroom set here actually is one of the times in the film where they were not allowed to shoot on location. Obviously, you can't close down a Hong Kong courtroom for a day to shoot scenes for a movie. So this was actually constructed at the Golden Harvest backlot. And it's fascinating when you go up there because, Hollywood studios have access to huge amounts of technical support and equipment which is used to construct realistic-looking backdrops. In Hong Kong, it used to be really a bunch of old guys with nails and hammers, and they could literally whip anything together. And I was lucky enough to work on a guy. He's not an old guy by any means. His name is Nan Jai, which means basically Nan Boy. And he certainly is a boyish fellow. And he's Jackie's prop master and has been on the last few films. I worked with him on our documentary, Jackie Chan, My Stunts. And he's now working with us on High Binders. And I swear, this guy is like the MacGyver of filmmakers. He can whip together a biplane out of... he can do the Blue Peter thing and whip together a biplane out of used toilet rolls and cardboard boxes. Basically, he can make something out of nothing and in 20 minutes flat. And I sometimes think that Hollywood filmmakers are spoilt for, in terms of the fact that they really don't need to depend on ingenuity because they have so much equipment which they use to support whatever they're doing on a given day. Whereas Hong Kong filmmakers never have had that kind of luxury and have really had to dig deep to find ingenious ways to cover up the limitation of the budget. So all of the set that you're seeing is literally hand-built and hand painted, and in an amazingly short amount of time as well. And it's interesting the way that contemporary films, or supposedly contemporary films, date like almost overnight, so much faster than period movies do. And we see this in a moment when Jackie's obviously brought in this tape which has supposedly damning evidence. And look at this state-of-the-art sound system that's being brought in. Now I guess he would have like some hyped-up mini disc or something. But this was the best they could do in the era when Police Story could be made. And it starts off with this quick burst of canto pop that comes out of the speakers, and I think that's a song by Alan Tam when he was with the Winners. But anyway, the few bars of canto pop music. Canto pop is a huge industry in Hong Kong. The Cantonese pop music industry. Generally, it's critically reviled, but my God, they sell huge numbers of units. And Jackie, of course, is also, as well as being an action star, is a pop singer, and he's also but primarily in Mandarin dialect. There's always, throughout the history of the Chinese entertainment industry, been this kind of tug-of-war between the Cantonese dialect, which is that of southern China and Hong Kong, and the Mandarin dialect, which is the official dialect of China, spoken throughout China and in Taiwan and elsewhere. So the films have gone back and forward, the songs have gone back and forward. It was actually Michael Hoy of the Hoy Brothers who kind of repopularized Cantonese singing back in the latter part of the 70s. But Jackie's really made a name for himself singing in Mandarin, and Mandarin, I think, is a dialect that really lends itself to love songs, to balladeering. And he's, a good singer. I mean, just the other day, he's on the set, he was serenading our leading lady, Claire Filani, and she was just knocked out because I think everybody thinks of him as being this cute action guy. He's the exterior. This is actually the genuine law courts. They were over on Hong Kong Island, and if you went back there today, you'd see it was exactly the same, except for the fact that there are now even more accommodation blocks and office blocks that are towering over this square. And a slight difference there between the interior and exterior. If you look at the tan on Jackie's face, always an occupational hazard in Hong Kong when you're shooting, because in the heat of summer it's so hot. You go out and shoot and suddenly you come back very brown, and if you've shot interiors at a different time, they might not match up, as there's a slight differentiation throughout this film in terms of Jackie's skin tone. He's naturally quite pale. I mean, if you remember him in Snake and Eagle Shadow, that was his natural skin colour. But he looks better with a tan and has maintained that to this day. So a lot of people have said to me, talking about Jackie recently, that he actually looks even more vibrant and energetic and better looking in person than he does on screen. Normally the opposite is true. And I think there is something to be said for his rude good health and his high energy levels. And when you meet him in person, girls who think of him as, maybe they respect him for doing stunts, but they don't think of him as being like a babe. When they meet him in person, several female friends of mine have said, my God, he's so much more handsome. So perhaps filmmakers, hopefully, with Highbinders we're doing that, but I mean, hopefully filmmakers will play to that and shoot him in such a flattering light that we actually capture on film some of the energy that he exudes in private life. This sequence was actually trimmed from the international print of the movie, so we didn't get to see Jackie on television. And these scenes where we see him being put up as the spokesman for the Hong Kong police. Here on the right of the frame, Fung Ha-on as one of our bad guys. This is probably the role for which he's best known. If you ask people, fans, about Fung Ha-on, they remember him for his part in Police Story. He is the latest in a long line of actors in Hong Kong. His father was an actor in the Peking Opera and the old black and white films. His sister, Fung Bo-bo, was actually one of the first action queens of Hong Kong cinema, though she played male roles. She was Fong Sai-yuk in some of the old black and white movies. And Fung Ha-on himself was a child actor, but his look lends itself more to being a villain. And you can see him in Dragon Lord, in Young Master, and basically from there on, he was on a kind of the line between being a stuntman, because of course he does a lot of action, he does a lot of his own martial arts, and an actor. I mean, he wasn't officially a member of the Jackie Chan stunt team, but he was there as an action player, collaborating with Jackie on most of the films he made during this era. And this film really defines him, and he has been in dozens of other films playing very similar roles as as kind of conniving martial arts fighting bad guys. And they used to chew out on that wonderful old phone. Again, as I was saying, these things date faster and faster. I have to say technology didn't really change as fast in those days, and I remember having one of those great big bricks, brick with an antenna, and it was still in existence. That was still the size of mobile phones for a while after that. Now they're getting smaller and smaller, and any film you make today, I was watching Swordfish the other day, and that's kind of cutting edge, but you think, maybe in even 3 months' time now, various equipment and things that you see in that film will probably be dated, because new technology seems to be mass-produced and mass-distributed, faster than ever. And so this film now, of course, looks very dated in everything apart from the action sequences, which remain state-of-the-art to this day. So Fung Ha-on is somebody who's still peripherally involved with the industry. He doesn't really act that much anymore, but he's called in to do action choreography. I remember seeing him a couple of years ago. He was in a film, I think it was called Serious Shock, Yes, Madam. And it was one of the last in that long line of cop movies with Cynthia Khan, young Lai Cheng. And he had a nice little fight sequence in that. But in Hong Kong, old actors don't die. They just really fade away and haunt the bars and the clubs of Tsim Sha Tsui, and still make a living doing occasional work on movies as an action director or as a character player. Though there is some longevity in Hong Kong films. Normally you start off in TV, you move on to doing movies as a lead, you grow older and you become a character player, and then you go back to TV again at the end of your career. You look at this movie now and you see people really on the cusp of going from some people had been actors in the film for some time and were about to make the transition to doing TV. TV in Hong Kong being a huge industry with these. Then when they shoot a show, they shoot it they show it every day, so you'll get 50 straight days of the same show. He's out in the new territories. Jackie's been demoted and sent out to work in this hillbilly country, and this beautiful little physical moment here. Bear in mind, this was the era when breakdancing could vaguely be considered hip. So Jackie wrote in this little thing here where he cleans his boot a bit Xiao Tao Gok. And this really is a case that officers who messed up in Hong Kong in the police would get these kind of postings to these little nowhere villages that were out there in the new territories. For those of you not familiar with Hong Kong geography, the Hong Kong consists of Hong Kong Island, Kowloon, which is, for want of a better word, the mainland or the peninsula of territory that comes down from China towards Hong Kong Island, and then beyond that, the new territories. And of course, the whole of that area was leased to the British up until 1997. And we see this place, the setting here now, is actually up in the rural New Territories. There's Tai Bo, who's a character actor and former stuntman. I remember once trying to explain to some colleagues of mine at a Hong Kong film company what Billy Blanks' Tai Bo was. I said, anybody heard of Tai Bo? And they go, yeah, that character actor who was in Police Story. So there you have this guy's Tai Po, T-A-I-P-O, and of course what Billy Blanks has is his Tai Bo. This sequence we're seeing now is another example of Jackie's developing sense of physical comedy. This whole thing with all the phones ringing with these various ridiculous requests, and he's left alone to deal with them. And it's an example of something that Jackie's his way of working on a scene like this would be that he would ask the set dresser to put together an office set featuring whatever you would find in an office. So he wouldn't really have any input at that stage. He would not do storyboards. He would not look at production designs. He would just tell somebody, okay, this is an office. It's at some remote police station in the middle of nowhere. What would they have in their main detective's duty room? And that's what you see. And then he would come in and then for any length of time really be playing with all of the different items that were there. And so what you're seeing here is the result of that kind of play period when he would... And then a lot of the times you see him doing that, and there'll be like a whole bunch of stuntmen just standing around, and they never really do anything until they're called by Jackie to help out, hold this, move that, try this, try that. And the stuntmen often, they're just to bounce ideas off. one of the problems we have sometimes with Westerners is they come onto a Jackie Chan film set, and of course they're full of energy and they want to be in a Jackie Chan movie. So they'll be doing running jumps and backflips and all this stuff in the background to kind of partly to warm up, partly to practice, and partly to show off, I feel. And by the time you get ready to shoot with them, all the energy's gone. So that's a problem. Whereas with the Hong Kong stuntmen, they just basically stand around Jackie watching whatever he's doing and conserving energy until that moment when they have to show it on camera. So that's the Jackie method. And I know it's a lot of Hollywood filmmakers would think it's really like going on the tightrope without a net to go into a sequence like this without having an actual game plan of how you were going to execute it. But Jackie has always used that working method that he finds the location and then applies his unique vision and unique ingenuity to how to really extract every physical and comic attribute that the location will offer. So this was a good early case of this. And again, I should point out, for those of you watching the Cantonese track, this is not Jackie's voice. It will be the voice of his regular voice double. So you would have the same guy doing his voice through pretty much the run of his career. And Police Story 3 was the first film where he said, hey, we're going to have sound in this movie. And they actually recorded live sound. And that was the first time, I think, that Hong Kong film audiences had gone into theatres and heard the real voice of Jackie Chan. Otherwise, of course, they'd heard it on TV and stuff like that. But in the movies, they never had. It was always somebody dubbing. And the syncing really left a lot to be desired. And some people have said, gee, you know what, the sync's out. But that's not the fault of the people restoring and releasing these films. In many cases, at the time the film was originally done, it was not the original actor. It was produced, the sound was actually being done, the syncing was being done in a race to get the film ready for a Chinese New Year release. And also it was an undiscerning market who were used to pretty average to poor dubbing for Cantonese language films. And just then, I mean, there's those quick moments of dexterity which are on the screen for just seconds. Would that we could see the many thousands of hours of footage of outtakes that lurks. I mean, I think Jackie still has the record from Dragon Lord of so they say over 1,000 takes for a single movement during the shuttlecock sequence. So he really is the king of multiple takes. Somewhere in the bowels of Golden Harvest, in their warehouse, there are all the unseen footage. There is all the unseen footage from all of Jackie's films from the 80s onwards. And I hope one day somebody will actually have access to that and see what's there, because I think there's a real treasure trove there, documenting the development and the style and the deleted scenes and all of the materials relative to this guy who's one of the most amazing physical comic actors of his generation. Then we have the scene with Maggie and he establishing their relationship. And this is the kind of thing that Jackie probably would improv on the set, which is that he would say, well, we have the car. What would make the scene more funny? Okay, the car hasn't got any brakes. And then in 5 minutes flat, the guys have to whip up the phone box for it to crash into. And that's often the way that things work on a Hong Kong movie. And it really freaks out Hollywood filmmakers when they cooperate with Hong Kong people, because it seems like there's no planning. But part of the energy, I think, comes from the spontaneity of the way that they construct the sequences. There was a couple of scenes actually cut from the film, scenes between Jackie and Maggie Jones' character. One when he's been reduced to being a beat cop, something they actually played up in the second movie, but he's been going back on the beat and doing a traffic patrol on a little mini motorbike with one of those helmets on, and she brings him like an ice lolly, and he's eating his ice lolly, and that sequence was trimmed along with several other scenes for Police Story. At the time, Jackie was famous for shooting far more footage than he could realistically put into a finished film. And so, as I mentioned, there's loads of unseen footage from Police Story. And this shot coming up, again, is doesn't really advance the plot, but it's a good example of Jackie to show how he can make use of any object, any time for a stunt scene, and also using slow motion there. Again, probably people would think that's not greatly innovative, but Jackie was really one of the first people to come in and say, okay, I am now going to explore ways in which I can use filmmaking technology to communicate different things in my established action and stunt sequences. So he is an all-rounded filmmaker. And here's one of my favourite little incremental moments of Jackie Chan dexterity, which he's done several times afterwards. This was the first time, if you watch it, he's going to go over the gate. And several people have noted to me how much they like these little touches in his films, which are just little throwaway moments, just the way he goes over when he seems to defy gravity. And then again, coming up here, I mean, he's just had that lightness of body and that he totally different action style. Bear in mind, this film came out, people like Stallone and Schwarzenegger, and it was the Rambo and Commando, and these movies were at their height. And when you look at Police Story and you see Jackie's, light-footed performance, it really makes those Hollywood action movies seem very sluggish and stagey. And just the action, the style of the action itself, but also just the physical dexterity and grace of its star. And we were talking earlier about the fact that with cop movies you do have an issue about the fact that cops have guns. So here we have a textbook case. Jackie, as a police officer, coming in to rescue his witness, Lam Ching-ha, is armed. Of course, doesn't realise it's a setup. And he wants to lead it into a martial arts sequence. So you have to have a scenario in which he's disarmed and he has to actually fight using his hands and feet rather than shooting people from a safe distance. Because people really want to see in a Jackie Chan movie him jumping around the place with that unique style. This is actually a villa by Clearwater Bay out in the New Territories. And Jackie now going actually this kind of short, fast and furious sequence. And it's really no more realistic than the old Kung Fu movies. It seems more realistic because of the fact that they're doing more basic techniques and dressed in street clothes. And whereas in the old Kung Fu movies, basically you'd exchange 50 techniques and nobody would fall down. Here you see one kick and bang, this poor guy go through. And he may have been a Jewish stuntman because he says something very much like oi when he hits the ground. And Jackie, again, you can see has come on the set using what's there, the ironing board just now, then the glass table. And this would have been done the same with that white-clad foot with the leg with a foot at the end that kicked him in the chest then would actually have been a fake leg, because this was another trick that Jackie often used, where it wasn't necessary to see the whole body of the other person. He would just have like a leg, which would be like a fake leg with a shoe on the end, and then have somebody poke him in the chest with it. And that meant you could control the shot much more easily than having somebody genuinely kick him every time. Another trick of the trade, I'm sure everybody already knows about, but we could talk about it anyway, and something that he employed when he reshot the ending of The Protector, is to simulate a kick to the head, which is obviously very hard to do with control. He would actually get a pair of trousers and a sock and a shoe, and you'd put that on the arm, on someone's arm, and for a close-up shot, that arm would look like a leg, and it would come out, and obviously almost everybody has far more control and dexterity when they're using their hands as opposed to their feet. So they would, use the hand to kind of almost slap the face, but it would look like you'd been kicked. And that's another technique that you see used in this film. This scene coming up, obviously it wasn't Brigitte Lin who was going off the side of the roof, but the poor stuntman that did it, he obviously it's a dangerous, very dangerous stunt, because of the shallow nature of the pool and because of the gap between the ceiling and the water itself. He did it one time and survived, and he was really happy. And Jackie said, no, you have to do it again, because the first time the guy had done it, he had just fallen straight like a rock, and Jackie wanted him to wave his arms like he was terrified, basically to stay in character. So the poor guy had to do it a second time, which is par for the course if you're a member of the Jackie Chan stunt team. So the fix is in, as they say, as they're going to knock Jackie out and frame him with the murder of a fellow officer with whom he's had something of an antagonistic relationship. And coming up is a shot that unfortunately you couldn't do anymore because they were shooting in Kai Tak, near Kai Tak Airport, so that you could actually have a plane thundering overhead at the appropriate moment. Now, of course, the airport's been moved out to Lap Kok, and for that reason you can no longer shoot the same kind of incredible scenes with the airplanes thundering low over Kowloon City. Jackie's old office in Kowloon Tong used to always get planes thundering over every few minutes, and it was a good investment though, because now that the airport's moved, it's very quiet there, so the property values have gone up. So at the time, people were like, why the hell are you putting up with these planes going overhead? And Jackie actually had the last laugh, because I guess they knew way ahead of time that that eventually a new airport would be built. Here we go. And Jackie wakes up on this outcrop of land. And this piece of land will probably be familiar to those of you like me who wasted their youth watching kung fu pictures, because it's a piece of land with a good view of the harbour beyond and of the waters surrounding Hong Kong, and was actually used as a location in any number of the old Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest movies as a setting for fight sequences. Though they used to kind of cheat the angle so you couldn't see the buildings beyond. They really just showed the open sea, because of course most of the films were period movies. This scene is typical of Jackie, because I mean normally he's playing like a happy-go-lucky daredevil cop or a daredevil hero, and from this point in the movie his characteristics change, and he is much more driven. Obviously he's been framed for a crime he did not commit, and he has more of a take no prisoners attitude. Quick plug there for Dongfeng, the Oriental Daily News. This scene is almost beat for beat and shot for shot the same as a scene in an earlier movie called Dragon Fist that Jackie did for the late director Lo Wei. And I don't know to what degree he was influenced, but there's a scene in that movie where he and the leading lady are beneath like a sheltering area and having a conversation. And they're a nice cut from Jackie on his teeny tiny moped to those Judge Dredd vehicles and the cops heading off from the cop shop. And now here he is. He's on the wrong side of the law. Most of the guys playing the cops are members of the Jackie Chan stunt team or action guys who were working in Hong Kong at that time. This was something that in Hollywood you don't tend to get too much of that, because there seems to be a very firm division between town and gown, between actors and stuntmen. But in Hong Kong, to save time, because there are no union restrictions to speak of, anybody who was a stuntman would also be drafted in to play supporting roles in films. Obviously, didn't happen the other way around too often. Though Jackie himself has done stunts for other people in his own films, in films which he himself has starred, which I think is probably unique. But they would, so often when you see henchmen or bad guys running around in the background, the guy playing the part is a stuntman, and of course that saves you so much time and energy, because you basically got one guy in one costume and he's doing his own stuff. And if Jackie needs to beat up a bunch of henchmen, he doesn't have to worry about doubling them, because they're his own people and they already have the timing. Because I think for fight choreography, I mean, we'll talk about this some more when we get to the end of the picture, the most important thing is not necessarily technique, because there are people with really extraordinary fighting technique who have had a very bumpy transition or have not really made the transition to doing action films. And for martial arts action movies, technique is secondary to timing. This scene coming up is, I like it because it shows Jackie having a rare chance to show his force as a dramatic actor. Whereas in most movies, he's kind of the easygoing underdog hero up against people with very strong motivations, be they good or evil. In this film, he's been pushed over the edge, and he has this extraordinary speech where he lambasts the superior officer and says, how dare you so readily accept that, I've transgressed, that I've killed somebody. You sit behind your desk and you're comfortable in your nice office, and we're out there risking our lives for you, and for not much money, and you just get a pay rise and a promotion. And I would think that not only the rank and file police, but maybe a lot of the audience watching that felt the same frustrations, because Hong Kong has always been like a society balanced between extremes. And at the time the film was made, it was a colonial society where there was an elite British or foreign educated Chinese civil service, which is represented here by the police captain. And then there were the underdogs. There were the people who actually worked and made the city run, who generally had to work incredibly hard to eke out a satisfactory existence. So that's why audiences really warmed to this movie, I think, and to Jackie's character in the film, because I don't think Jackie's somebody who is at all a political person, or indeed somebody who overanalyzes material, but I think he has kind of an inherent sense of fair play and a feel for what the public is thinking and feeling. And that's borne out by the fact that his films have been consistently, hits for so many years. You've got to know your audience. And beyond that, you've got to have a feel of the zeitgeist of the society around you. And certainly, originally in terms of Hong Kong, and now also in terms of the world market, Jackie's proved that he has those instincts and can consistently deliver films that people really want to see. So this sequence now, when he makes his escape from the police station, this actually was a redressed former police station that they redressed as a location for the film. In reality, I think probably the scene would have escalated a lot faster if you actually did escape with a police captain at gunpoint. And it is unrealistic that he should be able to escape so easily. Once you get out, you're in this is the lobby of, this is actually a school that was redressed. Now, from this angle, we're seeing the car park at Prince Edward, which is a police station. Actually, it's Mongkok police station, but it's in Prince Edward, with the neighbouring areas in Kowloon. And that flyover is very distinctive. And if you go past there today, you'll still see that the Mongkok police station is in the same place and has also got a car park outside. And there you go from that angle, the drive away. And it's unrealistic to think there would not be more of a chase sequence. But Jackie makes his getaway. Take a look there at the rural countryside of Hong Kong. A lot of friends of mine come out and they're really amazed. They think, because all the films tend to be set in the big wild city, that the whole thing is like some kind of Blade Runner metropolis, though that it is, and that definitely is the case. There's also great expanses of countryside in the New Territories, and Jackie made good use of it here to establish the difference between the city backdrop of Hong Kong and the countryside that leads up towards China. And you see him with his tanned look. I mean, he goes back and forward in the movie. There were some scenes that were shot where there were interiors where he's more pale. And this is obviously shot after he'd spent a significant amount of time out of doors in the hot sun of a Hong Kong summer. This sequence coming up, we really get to see Jackie performing with a new level of intensity, which continues through till the end of the picture. And I really like this shot because he's really playing a tough cop. I mean, he really is this kind of guy who's had enough and he's going to bounce back. And I think audiences really, at this point of the film, they're like, yes, go after the bad guys, kick some butt. And here we are in Tsim Sha Tsui at the Wing On shopping plaza. And I shot footage there for Jackie Chan by Stunts, because we came in and did a sequence with Jackie where he went back to show us where he shot scenes for Police Story, and would talk us through and demonstrate some of the tricks of the trade. And the Wing On chain is actually a chain of malls throughout Hong Kong. I don't know if it's malls or malls, but anyway, shopping centres, as we used to say in England. There's a Wing On department store. And when we did Jackie Chan My Stunts, we went in there and it was a real pain because we had to pay a huge amount of money. And then when we actually got into the place, we couldn't shoot in the daytime, which was a shame because, I mean, you could have hunted deer there, frankly, in the daytime. It was very quiet the time we went to location recce it. They'd only let us shoot at night and between certain hours and with very strict constraints. What they didn't say was that during the night time, all of the different franchises, all the people who were actually renting space in the mall would shut up shop and put up big metal screens. So the place only looked like it looked in Police Story for a relatively small amount of time. And then it would look like a closed-up shopping mall. It looked like the setting for Zombies Dawn of the Dead. So we had to work really quickly and shoot a lot of establishing stuff, and it was a headache. And I've not darkened the door of the Wing On department store since then. But they certainly, Jackie, when shooting this film, he really got his money's worth in terms of the support that they gave him and the access to the centre, because they were shooting basically as soon as the store closed for the night. Jackie and his crew would move in. They would refigure the set and refigure the place so that it fit the requirements of the scene, and then they would go into slam and bang, and they really had to shoot very complicated, very demanding action sequences with all broken glass and all these bits and pieces, and have the place cleared up and ready for business the following morning. So it was tricky, but I mean, I guess it paid off because people see it and actually think, yeah, that was a shopping mall. Whereas it would have maybe been even more expensive to take all of the set dressing and all of the merchandise and shift them up to Golden Harvest and recreate them all on a stage up there. Pretty much the same now as in this shot, if you take away the Christmas lights. And we shot by those escalators, and Jackie showed how he did the different kinds of action. It's only recently that people in Hong Kong have become more enthusiastic about films being shot on location, and the government now is taking some great steps to educate the public and encourage them to support local filmmaking, because it does have unexpected benefits in terms of tourism and raising the profile of Hong Kong. And so it's just recently that started to happen. And I don't know whether Jackie Chan, Police Story was the first. It certainly was an early film to use a shopping mall as a setting. It always used to be warehouses, used to be the setting for the final fight. You saw this in Police Story, and then also in America there are any number of films where they trashed shopping malls, something I heartily approve of. I detest the places. I much prefer High Street. That's Ben Lam there going over the side. Ben was a member of the stunt team who also became an action actor. They tried to launch him as a leading man in a film called The Angry Ranger, which is not a bad little action piece. It's all Jackie Chan style action, because all this Jackie Chan stunt team, Jackie produced the film and his stunt team did all the action, so it's very Jackie Chan-esque action. But Ben never really broke through as a leading man, and was a supporting player in many films and played bad guys in various movies. Here you see the use of these quick cuts where Jackie uses really quite basic technique, but the cutting gives it a new kind of energy. And in the old days, you used to have all the tiger and crane, all that wonderful stuff in long, extended takes. And now the technique was simpler, but the manner in which it was shot was more sophisticated. And people who were not familiar with Jackie's work, I think this is a good introductory film, or a good introductory sequence, because we get to see here this incredible shot, which you'd never see a Hollywood lead doing, of him going off that side, down, crashing down, doing his own stunt, getting up, so you see it's him, and then going back into the fray. And a couple of ill-fated security guards now getting hammered by the bad guys, and absolutely it's unrealistic that you would be able to cause this kind of ruckus in a mall and the security guys wouldn't have anything to say about it. Stuntmen called this film Glass Story when they were shooting it, because so much glass was shattered. And that shot just then of Jackie turning his head, that was actually the poster or the key art for many territories when the film was released. Big problem with Jackie's movies is the fact that very often they don't do sufficient stills photography or promotional photography during or after the film, so it's very hard for distributors to get quality images. Here's another example of Jackie actually turning up on the set and finding something he could use. Down through the glass this guy goes. They were actually using quite high density glass. There's a very light kind of sugar glass that's used, and it really wasn't reading right on camera. So a lot of people, including, of course, Jackie and Brigitte Lin, were cut. And this guy was pretty badly cut up as he went through as well, because the glass was not real glass, but it was like at several stages between the light sugar glass and real plate glass. And full power to Brigitte, and look at that smash shot there. I mean, that is you just feel the pain. And the thing about Jackie that I really admire is the fact that he has the likability that people don't want to see him get hurt. So it means so much more when you see him absorbing punishment than somebody you didn't care about. Here, really, this moment defines a new kind of choreography where he's got people running in from different frame, fake legs occasionally coming in. If you slow-mo that, you'll see on occasion that a leg comes in from out of frame. If you can't see the body it's attached to, then it's probably a fake leg. And see the shifting of camera speed there between the undercranking and then slow motion. This reaction there, the stunt guy coming down, doing these spins, bomb, 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 down through the glass. That was something that was adapted out from the wushu. If you look at the Chinese wushu players, they do those 360 spins in the air. And this was the first film where Jackie really came in and said, he does it for the first time in The Young Master in the fight at the end. And this was like the first contemporary movie where he said, let's try having the stuntmen do these really flamboyant reactions to enhance the power of the technique. And Jackie really showing off his not technique so much as his intensity in this fight sequence with Fung On. And there's a moment coming up which I always love, and I love the sound effect on it as well, which is the double headbutt, which I always remember replaying again and again because it is just something that I guess I hadn't seen in a Hollywood movie at that time. Look at the way they enhanced the power of the baseball bat by having a smash through the glass on the way. And realistically, I guess you wouldn't have done that. You would have just bashed the guy on the head. But that's the kind of trick. And there's the real Brigitte Lin going through this semi-fake glass, and she got cut doing that stunt. So, on the jacket, look at this, bop. And then up again, bop. Oh, I love that. That's just so cool. And then stuntman going through that stunt. Poor old Feng Han, he took a rest for that one. The motorbike. Now, just so that you know, actually, the sequence coming up, not to shatter any illusions, but the guy on the motorbike is not Jackie. It's actually Blackie Ko Xiao Liang, who's a veteran Taiwanese stunt guy. And so when he actually rides the motorbike through the glass, it's not Jackie, because it's a highly dangerous stunt. He's not a bike stuntman. That scene was ripped off wholesale for Rapid Fire with Brandon Lee. I use the term ripped off lightly, but it is, shot for shot, it's the same thing. And Brandon himself in interviews accepted the fact that he and his colleagues had been through their library of Hong Kong action movies and found sequences that they could incorporate, and gave credit to that. Jumping down onto a moving escalator, that's quite tricky. It's a difficult jump anyway, but if it's moving, then necessarily the landing, when you land, you're much more likely to be twisted and to twist your ankle on landing. Now leading up to our the major stunt of the picture, which has been talked about at length by Jackie, among others, but it's still an extraordinary stunt sequence. I mean, he's going to jump from the railing across to this pole, down through these electrified wires, which have got live currency going through them. But one thing people may not realize is that actually the jump itself, once he reaches the pole, though he can be badly burnt, is relatively safe. The big problem is that he has to make the jump to cover the distance between the railing and the pole. And if he fell in there, then that's it. He's history, because there was no way he could have survived the fall. They had actually stuntmen on the floor below, and if he was going to fall, they were meant to grab him, but like fat chance. This is another one of the times Jackie brought in this idea of completely defying logic and showing 3 different takes of the same shot because the audience would enjoy it, which I think is Jackie's rationale for doing a lot of things in his films. And one reason the audiences love him so much is he doesn't care about realism. He cares about putting on a good show the audience will enjoy. And he certainly succeeded. And I mean, the sequence we just sat through then, I think, is breathtaking today. And maybe the phones are clunky and the hi-fi is clunky, but my God, we still don't see too many better action scenes than that shot in, I'm sitting here in 2001, and we don't see many better action scenes than that in much more expensive films. And there's been a number of big action movies this summer, and where I think the action, the weakest element has been the martial arts action sequences or the action stunt combat scenes. There's an alternate ending to the film, which occurs after Jackie, the point they cut here, which is where he has this kind of, he really plays to the gallery by having his character beat up this the mealy-mouthed lawyer and also the main villain. So he physically diminishes them. He physically takes them out. And he, after this, whereas we end with a freeze frame, in the more widely seen version, there's another print where he continues, he finishes beating up on the main bad guy, and then he goes outside, and there's a meaningful look exchanged between him, bruised, beaten, and under arrest, as he is, and Brigitte Lin, who's being taken away also under arrest. And one reason I think this sequence might have been included is that there was still a problem in certain territories in Asia that if somebody had broken the law, that they had to somehow atone at the end of the film. So you couldn't have people, as Jackie does in here, go above the law and not in some way be seen at the end of the film to have been arrested or killed. So we do see in some prints of the film Jackie actually having been detained by his fellow officers for what had happened in the latter part of the film. And these amazing outtakes, here we are up towards Hammer Hill, and Jackie with the JC Stunt Team logo. It's been changed now, and he's just changed it again. Is it always updating, coordinating, Ben Lamb getting direction then. I love what Jackie told me. He says, you do stunts, you don't get hurt if you go, you don't get hurt if you don't go, you get hurt if you half go, so you have to commit. See the stunt guys standing around there? That's what they do. They just stand around and wait for the moment when they're needed. Brigitte rehearsing there. And the scene here where these poor guys are coming through, Boom, pain, off to hospital. Boom, that's one of the other takes of the guy going off the roof into the pool. And the car tipped over here, and one of the poor stuntmen being carried away. Now the more lighter stuff. And it really happens. I mean, I was kidding on the sort of high binders the other day. We've got like 90 minutes of outtakes and 20 minutes of movie, because he's always doing this stuff, and it's just so funny. And people always ask me, does he fake that? No, it really happens. What's different is that Jackie tells him to keep the camera running, and rather than cursing and stalking off, he kind of plays to it. Now look at that. He really had to shift, otherwise he would have been on the front wheels of that. And it'll sign the camaraderie between Jackie and Fung On. And fun with his leading lady, Brigitte Lin. I've never seen her interviewed, in English anyway. I mean, I guess she's one of these people who, having moved away from the industry, doesn't want to talk about it. Stuntman being carried away. And Jackie setting up the sequence here. And he could not have made the transition he made here had he not already trained a stunt team who could deliver the kind of action he was looking for. And there, Jackie recovering from yet another injury sustained in the line of duty. I mean, he really is held together by wire and sealing wax at the moment after years of abuse. But he's still standing, and it's the cool goodbye there. That's rehearsing for the jump, because as you see in the finish shot, the elevator is actually moving. And that's shot actually from the film. Bush. A couple of shots that are actually in the movie of guys going down through the glass. You can see why they called it Bole Goosey. Bole being glass, Goosey. Is that Bole John? Yeah, Bole Goosey. Bole is glass. Glass story. Bole Goosey. This one, Jackie Chan, when he was talking about it, when he says 20 years, still the best. And he's right, and he can get away with that. Well, this is Bey Logan signing off. Thank you. Sayonara, and take care. Bye-bye.